This paper was presented at the JCT Traffic Signal Symposium 2024, thanks to our media partner Highways News, and sponsored by AGD Systems, Four-Way Consulting, Traffic Group Signals, Smart Micro UK, TfL Software, PTV Group, Census Networks, and Starling Technologies.
Right, good morning everyone. So the Superloop, Jenny said that she lived on the Superloop, so maybe she should be standing here instead of me. But I've got about 15 minutes just to tell you what the Superloop is, and then what we did in network performance delivery to help its launch and make sure it indeed was super. This is what happened last time. This was last year, if you remember. I thought some of you who are on the other side of the camera might like to see the picture that I took at the end of last year's presentation. And Paul, my son, was very excited by your big waving, so thank you very much for that. Anyway, swiftly moving on. So what is the Superloop? Some of you may have heard it. I expect a lot of you maybe haven't, so let's just cover off some basics first. So Superloop is a new network of limited stop bus routes in London, so it's an express service. It has unified design and branding, and these are indeed the colours that they chose. I say they, it was nothing to do with me. So some very strong marketing colours. It has unified design and branding. Most of the routes are in Outer London, but I'll show you a map in a moment. Not all of them are in Outer London. It is a mixture of some old express routes and then a lot of new ones as well. And what it has done is created an express bus loop service in Outer London where often the east-west connections aren't so great. It's easy to get in and out of London, but not round. So there was, I suppose, an identified gap in public transport there. A little bit of a timeline on Superloop. So express services in London aren't a new thing. We've actually had some express services since the 80s, but there's only been 4 of them. So in March 2023, Sadiq Khan, London's mayor at the time, said he was going to launch Superloop. This was probably a very deliverable thing pre-election, so it was quite a clever move. It was around the time of ULEZ as well, but I'll let you make that judgment for yourself in terms of politics. So March 2023, it was announced, we're going to do Superloop. And then from April to October last year, there was consultations for all the new routes that were proposed. From April to July last year, the existing express routes were going to be rebranded and converted to Superloop routes. And then from December through to March this year is when all the new routes were launched. What does it look like? Here you are, here's a visual picture. There's a tube-style map on the right-hand side of the screen that shows you the loop. There's also a map of London with the routes overlaid geographically so you can see where they are. And as you can see, it really does form a loop in that kind of middle outer London area. There are 2 routes at the moment, SL6, SL8, that almost like spokes of a bicycle run into central London. They were previously existing routes. And then there is a new route, SL4, which is not currently launched yet. SL6 has some curiosities, so if anyone's struggling for a question at the end, I can answer some questions about the SL6. I'll talk a bit more about the SL4 later and why it's not yet live. But in total, there are 10 routes for Superloop. Covers about 138 kilometres of the TfL road network, and it serves or links up, I suppose, 55 bus and rail stations. So it's really good to get people to the transport hubs where they need to go a bit quicker. So what was our task in network performance delivery? There were people that wrapped the buses, there were people that designed the routes, there were people that made the shelters look nice. Our job in network performance delivery was how can we make these buses run better, more reliably, faster on the road network. So the first thing we wanted to do was those existing express routes, we wanted to make sure, as a minimum, they continue to perform well. We'll get on to some extra stuff that we did. But we wanted to make sure those existing routes performed as they did. And then we wanted to make sure that upon launch, the new routes performed really well. And then the final thing we thought, we set ourselves a bit of a challenge. What extra could we do so these services really do feel super? How can they feel express? What could we do that was a bit more innovative and interesting? So the most obvious thing for us to do was to pivot our RARR program. Now the RARR program is what I presented on last year. It's our route analysis program. It's where we take the struggling bus routes in London, And we basically look at them in a lot of detail and try and make them faster through a variety of different techniques, which again, I'll go into in a moment. So we had our RARR program set for the chosen routes in London, and then we were told, get rid of those ones, put the Superloop routes in, and make the Superloop better. So when I say we pivoted the RARR program, we effectively tore it up and started again. And seeing as we just about firmed up the program, it was a bit frustrating, but obviously it was fine. So the first few periods of last year's program, we did continue what we'd already started. And in fact, the X26 was in periods 1 and 2 of last year. And then from periods 5 through 8 was when we injected the Superloop routes into our program, and we covered them as we would normal RARR routes. So what did we do? We analysed those routes, or where we could, because some of the routes hadn't even launched yet, remember. We looked at areas of slow-running bus services. We walked the routes, that's something that we did. We wanted to feel like the passenger. We filled our buckets, and last year I talked about the buckets that we look at in the RARR program. Those buckets were identifying schemes to make things better, such as pedestrian cancel detection, or maybe a more intelligent method of control, maybe even a bus lane. And in fact, one of the bus lanes we proposed, I did travel through that area in London recently, and it has been installed, which is brilliant. So that was really nice to see. Another bucket we fill, we look for signal faults to make sure our signals are working efficiently and effectively. And the final bucket that we look at are compliance issues. So could we raise things for compliance? So we did our RARR work on those Superloop routes. And this is what we did, just to give you a bit of a summary. We walked about 100 miles of the network, so we covered the whole Superloop route. And we did, as it was summer, eat a few ice creams on the way, which was quite nice. We identified 34 signal faults, which were reported. We identified 7 compliance issues to raise. And our 2 bigger buckets, the ones where we really try and seek some improvement, 73 capital improvement schemes were identified on the Superloop network, and 57 bus priority timer reviews were identified and implemented. And that's where we look at how the signals are performing and then improve the bus priority, improve the timings to try and help those buses go through faster. Just to help you visualize some of those numbers, here's a map on the left in green of the timer reviews that we did, and the map on the right in purpley pink, I suppose, where we identified all the schemes. And if you cast your mind back to the Superloop map, certainly the schemes that we identified, you can kind of see a bit of a Superloop representation there. So we were really targeted in where we did it. There are some gaps there. Maybe it didn't need schemes. There are some areas, certainly in North London, where the Superloop runs on the North Circular, which is a free-running carriageway. There weren't any signal schemes for us there. Our next challenge came about, it's a bit of an unintended consequence, I suspect, from the route rebranding. As I mentioned, we already had 4 routes, 4 express routes in London that were just going to be renamed. They were going to be rewrapped, new buses, given a new name. Lovely, totally understand it from a marketing perspective. The problem it caused us was that at all the signals that had bus priority, we see these individual routes. So the X68, for example, as it travels through a junction, it talks to our system and it says, I'm the X68, I'm here, I'd like some bus priority, please. The problem was when the X68 is changed to the SL6, on day 1 of the SL6 going through that junction, our system won't recognise the SL6, so those buses would actually be slower. They wouldn't get bus priority. So we had to identify where these 4 routes have bus priority and then update every single bus priority configuration just to maintain what they were already getting. So I do suspect this was an unintended consequence, but it was fine. We did that. And actually it was at 140 locations, the red dots on the map, was where we had to update those bus priority configurations to see the bus, to maintain status quo. And then for the new routes that hadn't even been launched, we had to look at the routes where they were going to go, cross-reference them with our sites that ran bus priority, and then add them into the bus priority configurations. So upon launch, those junctions would see the buses, and those new routes would again get bus priority. So almost 200 bus priority configurations had to be updated. It was quite a time-consuming task. So that was sorting out just seeing the buses. Then we wanted to do something a bit extra. It gave us an opportunity to be creative, to be innovative, and this is where I just want to run through a few case studies to show you what we did at a few different locations. So the first thing that we did was trying to have some dedicated detection points for the non-stopping Superloop buses. One of the rules around bus priority is that ideally you would detect the bus once it's on its free run to the stop line. So it's already stopped and it's on its way. We know it's not going to be interrupted. What Superloop gave us the opportunity was that maybe if that Superloop bus isn't stopping at a bus stop, we could create a new detection point further upstream. So we saw that bus earlier. It then has a longer run to the stop line, which gives us a bigger window to offer some bus priority, certainly extensions, and we love extensions. They're the best form of bus priority, as I think I've said before. So this is what we did here on Uxbridge Road, one of the examples for the SL8. We created a new virtual detection point further back, longer journey time, bigger extension window. As a result, more extensions for the SL8 compared to all the other bus services which stop at the bus stop a bit further downstream. So 10% of SL8 gets extensions, only 6% of other bus routes get extensions. So really nice. Second case study, slight variation on a theme, I suppose, is about detecting the Superloop separately so we can offer the Superloop stronger recalls. So the other form of bus priority, a recall, where we see the bus, the junction then has to spin through faster to get back and get that bus on its way. We do limit recalls because they can be quite damaging to junction operation. But what we thought was if we could separately detect the Superloop, we can then in our system give the Superloop more generous thresholds to allow recalls to occur whilst limiting recalls for those other non-express services. So that's exactly what we did here. Separate detection point and really impressive figure. 27% of Superloop buses here get a recall compared to only 10% of non-Superloop buses. So that's better bus priority, faster moving Superloop. That's exactly what we wanted. The third case study is something that we've termed the always late trick. And this is something that we've done at differential bus priority sites. Differential bus priority is where we have busy junctions, either very busy with traffic or very busy with buses, and we look to limit the bus priority we give, only giving priority to those late running buses. What did we do? We updated our config, we changed our config, we tricked it, if you like, so that every bus that returns on our system, which is a Superloop bus, appears as late. That means that every Superloop bus will be in a chance of getting a recall, not just the late ones. So that was going to help them on the way at the busiest sites as well. And again here, we did this technique again on Uxbridge Road, and we increased recalls by 7%. Because they were being detected by the same detector here, we aren't able to isolate that, but seeing as we just changed the Superloop in our config, we can be very confident that that increase is all down to Superloop buses getting a benefit. The final case study I want to show you is something on secondary detection, which we've had the ability to do for a long time, but we've never really explored it because we've had too many other things on. But I said in the first example, what we like to do is see our bus nice and early. The problem is if we see the bus too early, there could be a variability in journey time along the link. And as a consequence, the extension that you give that bus, if the bus is a bit slower, it might not actually get through the traffic lights. So you've given an extension, the bus doesn't get the benefit. What we do with secondary detection is we see the bus nice and early, and then we have a second detector nearer the stop line that corrects the bus journey time. It corrects the extension. It makes sure that that extension is a worthwhile one and a good one. And if the bus is a bit faster, we can chop the extension short so it's less disruptive. So this is something that we did at this site near Woolwich. We increased the extensions from 20 to 60 per day. And we know that these are good extensions. They're accurate, they're beneficial, and they're not as disruptive. So was all of our work worth it? So using some data that we had for the existing routes, we were able to measure the people hour benefit saved for the SL7, the SL8, and the SL9. This is where we look at the number of passengers on the bus and compare it to the journey time through the junction. And we were able to cumulatively save 149.3 hours for passengers per day. And then looking at some real runtime information, I'm on the orange light. I'm all good. I'm good. I'm almost done. Where was I? Looking at the actual runtime data, 3 minutes 30 to 3 minutes 45 saved per run for the SL7. So really nice improvement for that one. That's the route that runs from Croydon to Heathrow, so a big passenger service for people traveling to the airport. And then up to 3 minutes or 3 minutes 10 saved per run for the SL8 as well. We also saw passenger numbers increase above values that we would expect. Normally it's in the low percentages, and in fact some areas of London haven't recovered since COVID. So some really encouraging bus patronage growth, and this gets TfL revenue, which is really important for us. But Superloop doesn't stop there. There is some other stuff coming. I mentioned the SL4 hasn't been launched yet. The SL4 is due to run through the Silvertown Tunnel. It runs from Canary Wharf to Grove Park. Silvertown Tunnel is still in construction. So the SL4 is due to launch in spring 2025. We have already covered the SL4 as part of our RARR programme, and we've identified 13 schemes that are going to be implemented. They are already in flight, so that's great. They're going to be implemented for when it launches. And then we've identified 7 reviews that we want to do prior to launch as well. And in fact, Sadiq Khan did get re-elected, and one of his pre-election pledges was to expand the Superloop network to have Superloop 2. So here is a rough idea of what it might look like. This is all subject to change, but it's a proposal for 10 more routes on the Superloop network. So we await news of that and what we might get our teeth stuck into on that one. There we go. I'll take some questions. And thank you. There's some, what I think, super interesting Superloop facts for you to mull over as well while I take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. You certainly zoomed through that in proper Superloop style. That was great. And ending with announcement of Superloop 2, I absolutely could not be more happy now. It's brilliant. What a good start to my day. So do we have some questions for Michael? Yeah, please.
Yeah, Peter Richards, National Highways. You're talking about putting loads of detectors here, there and everywhere for Superloop buses and a second detector. Did you consider the approach of putting a GPS in the bus and tracking the route via its GPS alone, which gives you the flexibility to change the route if you need to? If there's diversions, road closures, whatever, you can just program a new route straight off. So to put no more detectors. Yeah,
so our system does have GPS in the buses. The system that we then have at TfL, we still use iBus 1. We're moving towards iBus 2. So these are virtual detectors. They're not physical detectors. They are GPS location points. And when the bus effectively hits that GPS point, it does ping. We're semi-limited, without going into loads of detail, we're semi-limited to how many of these detectors we can put at each junction, just depending on how many bits we've got configured in the configuration. We could, for diversions, create new detectors, but with over 900 bus routes, it's hard to keep things on the straight and narrow anyway, let alone for a short-term diversion. Yeah, well, this is iBus 2, which is coming for us.
Thank you very much. I'll take one more question, if we've got one. No, everybody's happy? Okay, thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you.